Anthony, thank you so much for joining us on SaaSy AF. Just to give a bit of background of SaaSy AF, we decided that we wanted to break through the BS that typically comes along with bro culture, the manosphere, and burnout that most companies typically face and most founders typically face. I'm actually very humbled to have Anthony Scaramucci as a guest. He's the founder of Skybridge Capital, global investment firm, former Whitehouse Communications Director, which I'm looking forward to getting into. Is the host of The Rest is Politics US, which I must say that I am a big fan of. And no slander to Alistair Campbell. It is my preference to listen to you and Caddy K over The Rest is Politics UK.
I'm going to make sure I tell Alistair that, Aaron.
He was great fun to talk to whenever we had him. Harvard Law graduate. He holds a JD from Harvard Law School and a BA in economics from Tufts University. Regular contributor on CNN, BBC, Fox News. Anthony, is there anything that I missed there? This was your condensed bio.
I appreciate you reading it, Aaron, the way my mother wrote it. Okay, I didn't expect you to go into that level of detail, but thank you. And it's great to be on with you. And what do you want to talk about today?
What I would love to hear, am I right in saying Brooklyn? You were born?
Exactly right. So the family's originally from Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Well, obviously we're a long while back. We're from Italy. My grandparents came here. We all landed in Brooklyn. We then moved out to Long Island. So I was basically raised on Long Island, but the family originally comes from Brooklyn. You're correct in that. I was raised in a blue-collar neighborhood out here. So if you were in my neighborhood, we had families where the dad was a sheetrocker. We had plumbers in the area, landscapers. My dad happened to be a crane operator. He was in the Operating Engineers Union. He spent 41 years on the job in Port Washington, the town I grew up in. The town was actually a mixture of wealthy and middle-class people. We grew up in the middle class. Aaron, I would never dishonor my dad's work ethic by telling you I grew up poor. I did not grow up poor. We had a lot of comfort in our lives. You know, it was a small house. We had a tight budget, but it was a very comfortable way to grow up and a very blessed way to grow up. And different from Europe, Ireland, and UK, we had a public school system. I think you guys call that something differently there.
Yeah,
but it's sort of like the state funded schooling, the government funded schooling, and so I'm a product of that. A good public school education in the U.S., which gave me a good foundation to get into college and eventually into Harvard Law School, and that got my career started. Hard to believe this, okay? I still can't believe I'm saying this to you, but it's 36 years ago that I graduated from Harvard. And so in my 36-year career, I've had some ups and downs. I'm reasonably short guy. I almost didn't make the height requirement for my roller coaster career, Aaron. I've had a lot of ups and downs. But thankfully I was tall enough to get on the coaster, and I've enjoyed the ride. I guess my message to your listeners and your viewers, even the bad parts, and there were some bad parts, there were some real ups and downs and some stress. And obviously when I got fired from the White House, that was a brutal period of time in my life. But even those parts of it, I think this is the message. You ride through, you keep going, you get up in the morning, you dust yourself off, you forgive yourself for your mistakes, and you just keep going, I think is the big message I have for people.
I couldn't agree more. I think that you always get the question, is there anything that you regret? And my response is, are you happy with your life now? And if you are, then you shouldn't regret anything, because each one of those mistakes got you to where you are, and each one of those, the good times, the bad times, that got you to where you are today. So how does a kid from Brooklyn end up one of the biggest hedge fund managers on Wall Street?
Well, I would say this to you. It is the promise of America. the certain societies, they close the walls or they have a very thick, high wall. If you have a certain accent or you're born in a certain neighborhood, you may get blocked out of certain things. The certain societies have a fairly structured aristocratic or class system, if you will. And in America, we have elements of that. I'm not trying to say that we don't have any elements of that. We do have elements of that, but the opportunities are so far and wide, and the demand for good people are so far and wide that they have to fill the void. My grandfather said one of the best lines. He said, "Yeah, in Italy I couldn't find a job. There were no jobs. But when I got to America, there were countless number of jobs. And even if they didn't like me, they didn't like my accent, they didn't like the color of my face, they still hired me because they needed somebody to do the work, And so in the United States, if you train yourself, which I did, and even if people want to hold you back for whatever reason, it's sort of impossible to, because you can build a business, find enough clients that want to be a part of that business with you. And of course, if you do a good job for clients, they'll stay with you and you can grow that account base.
Yeah, I definitely find, so traveling back and forth to the US, we're actually a US company based in Ireland being built by the ceasefire generation. But what I tend to notice is it comes from the American dream element that you guys have nailed in terms of from childhood. There's an entrepreneurial spirit, whereas the likes of the UK, it's become a lawyer, become a doctor, but become something in the service industry, which there's absolutely no problem with. It's not ultimately driving you to wanting to build a business.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up an interesting point. Bono, I heard him speak once. He said that in Ireland, in America, you could drive by the big house, and you look at the house. You say, "Wow, that guy's got a big house. Someday I'm going to have that big house." And Bono once said that when I drive by the big house in Ireland, I'm like, "Okay, let me burn that house down
Yeah,
because I can't get to it." And so,
yeah,
I guess the real question is, it's harder in America now, so there is some more resentment in America. I think it's led to some political populism. But I think the real question is, how do we create the widest level of equal opportunity possible for people, no matter where they live? How do we, you didn't choose your parents. I didn't choose my parents. I certainly didn't choose the color of my skin or, frankly, my intellect, my brain capacity. But how do we get people to the starting block roughly equal? I'm certainly someone that's born to a very rich family are going to be ahead of me at the starting block. But can you get me a good enough education? Can I get a good enough amount of health care in my life and nutrition, frankly?
hmm
In the United States, Aaron, you'd be blown away by this, but 40% of the young kids that are going to the elementary schools, grades 1 to 6, 40% of them are not doing well, primarily because they're hungry. They
yeah,
show up at the school hungry. And so the question is, can we get them a meal so that they can have their stomach grumble less and they can get their minds focused? And
yeah,
so these are the things. I'm not. I don't want to make light of these things. These are hard things for every society and every government, every family. But I just want you to think about it this way: if you can create a sense of fairness, generally people will be happy. My grandfather didn't have the biggest house, but you know what he had? He had this aspirational idea in his head that his children would have a bigger house and that his grandchildren would have a bigger house than his children. And if we can get
yeah.
people thinking like that, then all of a sudden they start to feel better about themselves.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously the big beautiful bill and the cuts to the is it SNAP for children's feeding elementary school kids. I can't understand why something like that would be included because again, if you're hungry, you're not learning. So it really is quite ridiculous.
You want to take more control over society, educate the people less.
Yeah,
Right. Remember, a democracy flourishes, Aaron, with well-educated people, people that understand their civic duty, and frankly, people that understand the checks and balances in a system like the United States to prevent levels of autocracy or to prevent levels of power concentration. I think the country's flourished because we've been diligent about making sure no one group of people can
Yeah.
really lord over the other group of people. So, but if you want to lord over the other group of people, or you want to try to create some type of authoritarianism, limit the educational process in the country, and that'll be a step in that direction.
And I suppose I think this is kind of down to social media where there is that element of Orwellian doublespeak where fake news, misinformation, and the likes of that. As somebody that is so prominent in the public realm, how do you navigate what to trust and what not to trust?
Such a good question. So I will say this to you. I'm not sure of the answer. How's that for an answer? I'm not sure. I think that, like you mentioned, Alistair Campbell. Whatever you think of Alistair Campbell or Rory Stewart, they're fair arbiters of the truth. They come at things with a level of analytical objectivity. And I think the reason why their podcast is so popular, frankly, is because of that. And I think that the reason why these podcasts are doing better, your podcast, other people's podcasts, is that people can see a genuine authenticity from the podcast host and potentially from the guests that the podcast host is selecting. In the corporate media and in the old media, if you will, there's a lot going on there. The right-wing media, well, here's the slant, here are the guests we're going to have, here's the narrative that we're going to propose. Left-wing media, we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be a different narrative. And I think people have gotten numb when they turn on the television. They're like, okay, I'm going to get played here some way, somehow.
Yeah.
The objectivity is gone. And so I think the reason why you're doing well, and frankly, my show, The Rest is Politics US, or Alistair, the original Rest is Politics, is doing well, because people are like, hey, there's no filter, there's less editorial nonsense, and there's objectivity. So I'm in the search for those people.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to discern, frankly, and I've been disappointed too. I thought some people are authentic. Turns out they're not that authentic, and vice versa.
Yeah. I find not not sponsoring us at all at this stage, but Ground News is a fantastic app for giving you the balance of, and I absolutely love it because everybody's got an ulterior motive, everybody's got an agenda. That's okay, but as long as you're aware of it and you know what to trust and what not to trust, I think there's a lot more concern just touching back on education with regards to social media literacy, being taught to kids. Like, I work in AI and I've been caught by deepfakes, and they're so good now that
So good.
it's almost impossible to
Oh yeah.
not get caught by them.
Oh yeah. Somebody was doing robocalls with my actual voice accent, the intonation of my voice, promoting a product that I had nothing to do with. I was like, okay, wow. And then you have to figure out who's doing it and then get it to stop.
Yeah, that's almost a VPN under a VPN under a VPN, and turns out that it's somebody halfway around the world. Next topic that I would love to get into, Anthony. What is Donald Trump actually like behind closed doors?
Well, people that don't like him are going to be surprised by what I'm going to say. He's charming. If you find him behind closed doors and you find him in a small setting, even if you've had a sparring match with him on social media, he's gonna let that go. He's gonna be pretty charming. My friend Bill Maher, I don't know if you recognize his name. He's the
Yep.
American comedian, high profile, 22 years with that HBO show, and
Yep.
15 years prior to that on ABC. Bill Maher would tell you that they've sparred with each other, they've sued each other, and yet,
I believe it was the orangutan
yeah, he called him an
incident.
orange orangutan. Trump sued him for that, and Bill brought to the meeting a list of all the things that Donald Trump had said about Bill over the years. And of course, Trump signed it. Bill put it in a frame on his in his office, and so. But yeah, no, he's charming. He's listen. There's a reason why he's returned to the presidency. Again, you can like or dislike Donald Trump, and we can question some of his motives. I'm happy to go through his policies, things I like, and things I don't like. I want to try to be as objective as possible. But alone with Donald Trump in a room, most people will find him charming. They will not see that outward facing, the bellicosity of his rhetoric, the
Yeah.
bullying, the sort of outlandish attention seeking nonsense that sometimes he's portraying. He's not that way in private. I'm not saying he's not that way in private sometimes, but generally he is not that way in private.
Yeah. I always say that if he wasn't the most powerful man in the world, he is objectively funny and hilarious. Some
Oh,
of the stuff that he comes out
I
with.
tell people, Aaron, I tell people he's the most famous comedian in the world. He has a stand-up dryness to his soliloquies, if you will. I mean,
Yeah.
I laugh at some of the stuff he says.
Yeah. And I think that certainly the attempt on his life and his reaction to it in the second the fight was, I'm sure that swayed quite a few people, because that energy was, it was phenomenal to look at, as tragic of the circumstances that they were.
Yeah, well, thank God he wasn't hurt,
Yeah.
honestly, because I think political violence, there's no place for that. If you dislike him, beat him at the ballot box. I don't think there's any place in a democracy for political violence. But I would say this about him: not only are you right about what you're saying, it brought Elon Musk to the table. And I know Elon Musk and Donald Trump are in a row right now, and they've more or less broken up their relationship, if you will. But Elon Musk last July gravitated toward the president because of the assassination. And I think, again, being objective, Elon Musk really helped him get back to the presidency. He helped him in terms of political fundraising, awareness. He created space for other Silicon Valley venture capitalists to enter, where they were sometimes ideologically afraid to do that. And he also helped him, I mean, significantly helped him. And I would make the case, I think Elon is correct, he helped him win. He helped him win Pennsylvania, which was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you view the likes of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, these large oligarch tech founders? How do you view them getting involved in the political realm? Do you think they should? Do you think they should be seen as political actors, or just keep them out of it altogether?
Well, listen, we're in a free country, so they should be able to do whatever they want in terms of their advocacy for political leaders or not. I guess the one problem I'm having now is that we've overly slanted in America the politics for rich people and the politics for large corporations. There's a very famous case here in the United States, Supreme Court case called Citizens United.
Yep.
And in that case, Justice Scalia said you could use your money. It's a form of free speech. You can advocate for your political candidates or your policies. You can send unlimited amounts of money to those objectives. And you can do that as long as you set it up in a political action committee. There's certain protocols, but you can basically do that. And so what that's done, it's skewed our legislative agenda. It's skewed our executive political decision making towards the very wealthy. So those men that you're mentioning, and they're mostly men, so let's just call it what it is, those companies would have been broken up in the age of Teddy Roosevelt. Those companies would have been busted the way the Rockefeller trusts were busted at the turn of the 20th century. And the great irony of all this is the last big bust up in America was in 1984, where AT&T, our phone company, it's so long ago now people don't remember, but our phone company, we had one phone company in America, and it was a monopoly, and it controlled all the phone lines, and it dictated what the costs were for local phone calls and long distance phone calls. And it became this behemoth. The government made a decision to break up the company. And when they broke up the company into smaller pieces, it unleashed a tremendous amount of technology. In fact, the great irony is the companies that you're referencing all benefited from the breakup of AT&T because they were sitting on those HTTP protocols. They were sitting on all the different technology that we needed to do interactive video gaming, interactive phone calls, like the one you and I are doing right now to do this podcast, the internet, all that stuff. They were sitting on it. And so sometimes what happens is when you have very large companies like this, yeah, they in some ways they provide you good service, but in other ways they curtail growth and development because they want to sit on the economic rent of what they've already created. And so Roosevelt would have broke them up, Teddy, but because they are so powerful in terms of the money that they're able to flex in the society, they likely won't get broken up. And listen, Lena Khan, the FTC, controversial FTC chairwoman under Joe Biden, I think she brings up a lot of really good points. I'm a lifelong capitalist. I'm a right-leaning person politically. I'm sort of left-leaning socially, but I think these companies have become too powerful. And I think that they're sitting on lots of technology that smaller companies could take advantage of if they allow them to. And I would just make the case that you guys would have never been formed, frankly, never formed, had AT&T been allowed to continue on its monopoly reign.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And I
you're bringing
think
up a really good point.
there's also the element of the melting pot that is the States that is for some unknown reason trying like I'm obviously Irish, you obviously have Italian heritage. My family obviously wasn't smart enough to get out of Ireland during the potato famine. They were obviously just going to stick it out. So I think that by taking that away as well as you're the best and brightest that you typically get with inviting everybody in. You know, get the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and it's the same thing. You're not getting that input and that different culture and that makeup that makes America such an amazing place to be, to visit, and to live.
Again, great. This is such good questions, you know. So I mean, this may be too far, but I'll say it anyway. I think you can live anywhere today
Yeah,
and be profitable. I think you can live anywhere, and I have friends of mine that are working from home in South Carolina. They have a great lifestyle. They're doing things that are in the corporate world here in New York. They're getting a high corporate salary, and they're getting the benefit of a less lower standard of living, cost of living, if you will,
yeah,
in South Carolina. So to me, you know, it's interesting because you mentioned a potato farm, you potato famine. You're in the Industrial Revolution. People are starving. They can make a choice to migrate, or like your family did, to stick it out. Today, you could sit here. I'm talking to you from my house.
hmm,
I have a ring light. I've got a 4K camera. I've got this microphone in front of me, and I can run the business. I can run the podcast businesses. I can run my business right from here. Now, there's good news to that, and so that allows me to be mobile and that allows me to be flexible. But there's also bad news to that because I would rather be with you in person than do this over the phone because I think you and me in person, we're going to get a better vibe off of each other.
yeah.
And I think we got to be careful about that.
I don't have kids, but it's a concern for me with the next generation because of COVID and the social skills that you typically get during those formative years whenever we were all in lockdown, and the social skills that will then be lacking, I think will become a big issue. But um, just touching back on Mr. Trump, or President Trump, to give him his earned title, he's obviously he makes decisions on the fly. As a Wall Street guy with the markets just crave stability and predictability, how do you manage that on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think it caused a big problem for the aides in his first term. I think the second term aides have made a decision. I think the second term aides that are working for him are just letting him be him. There's tactics and strategy, and I think the president has very good political instincts. Again, I want to be balanced with the president. He has very good political instincts. He can read the room. He can sense where his base is and where others are. Um, we could talk about this military strike or not. I think that, we won't know if it was a good decision for several months, even a year.
Yeah.
If you're telling me that he can do this and there'll be no repercussion, and he's taken the threat of a nuclear Iran off the table, then I will applaud him. If you're telling me that we're going to go into a protracted war as a result of this, then I'll tell you, man, we've got a, I wish we didn't do this. It's very, very hard to know. I wouldn't have done it, but I understand why it was done, and as an American, I'm glad that the troops are safe.
I'm going to end it with two questions. The
Yeah,
first
tell
one
me.
being, what book would you recommend somebody to read outside of your own books?
Yeah, well, of course. Well, the number one book I would tell people to read is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's gotten more fanfare now, but I would tell people to read that book because it's a timeless guidebook on how to control your emotions
Yeah,
in a world that's going to shove you. The world, you're born alone, you die alone. There'll be lots of indignities during your life. There'll be some great things that happen, but there'll be trials and tribulations. And the book is really about how that great General Aurelius, handled his trials and his tribulations. And I think it's a good guidebook to recognize that everything that we're dealing with here on this planet is impermanent.
yeah.
It's a short visit on the planet. As Mel Brooks once said, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive, Aaron. And I think that it's a good book for that.
Just on that, I've got a tattoo of Marcus Aurelius on my chest.
Oh, there you go.
I'm a big Stoic fan. Have read Meditations multiple times, and
Yeah, I think it's important. I try to read it once a year. January 1st, I take the first 10 days of the year to read Meditations again.
what do you see as something that we can be optimistic about?
Well, I think that we have to look at the arc of history and see that through history we've advanced. Our societies have gotten richer. Poor people are doing better than ever before. If I said to you, would you like to live today in 2025 versus, let's say, 1825, 200 short years ago? I think everybody would say yes. We have better medical attention, more entertainment, better food. There's a whole host of things that are happening that are better.
I would argue that being on this side of the Atlantic, the better food thing might not be the
Yeah,
case, but
maybe not your food, but our food's tiny. Although we have a lot of processed food, but I get your point is well taken. But I just think that the quality of life arc is moving still in the right direction, and I think there's going to be another introduction of lots of productivity gains for our societies. And if we can just, again, I'm about fairness. How do we make the society fairer? I'm for equal opportunity, Aaron. I'm not for equal outcomes. I don't mind there being an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos. In fact, I applaud them. They deserve their success. But let's create more equal outcomes for people because I didn't pick my parents. You didn't pick yours. I certainly didn't pick the location of my birth, nor did you. But how do we let people get to the places they want to go in their life? And that's by providing some level of equal opportunity.
yeah, fantastic. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time. It's
Great to
been
be
an
on with you,
absolute
brother.
pleasure. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time.
Well,
So
it was flattering to be invited on, and I look forward to our next discussion, I hope.